This man has to spend $100 billion in just one day or he dies. Sounds impossible, right? But the craziest part isn't the money, it's how an ordinary poor man ended up trapped in this nightmare. And by the time you discover the truth, you'll be asking yourself one question: if you were him, what would you do? My name is Patience. Welcome to Etanalog. Let's go back to where all of this started. Long before the money, long before the curse, long before one ordinary man was forced to spend $100 billion in a single day just to stay alive, there was only one thing in Etanalog's life. Poverty. Not the kind people complain about after buying a cheaper phone. Real poverty. The kind that slowly steals your peace. The kind that makes tomorrow feel like a punishment instead of a promise. Every morning before the sun came up, Etanalog carried his old pump and walked to the roadside. That little pump was all he had. He repaired tires. He pumped air into flat tires. If he was lucky, he earned enough money to buy food before night came. If he wasn't, he simply went home hungry. His hands were always covered in grease. His clothes always smelled of engine oil. But no matter how tired he became, he never stopped working. Because there was someone waiting for him at home. His wife. Her name was Huchena. If Etanalog fought poverty on the roadside, Huchena fought it in the market. Every morning, she carried a small basin filled with tomatoes, peppers, and onions. She would sit under the hot sun for hours, smiling at customers, hoping someone would stop. Some days she sold a few things. Most days she didn't. Every evening, she returned home carrying almost the same basin she had left with. That was their life. One man trying, one woman trying, and somehow it was never enough. The painful part was that they never blamed each other. Etanalog never looked at his wife and called her lazy. Huchena never looked at her husband and called him useless. They knew the truth. Both of them were doing everything they could. Life was simply stronger. Sometimes they had food. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes there was only enough food for one person. Those were always the hardest nights. Etanalog would smile and tell his wife he had already eaten outside. Huchena would smile back and say she wasn't hungry. Both of them were lying. Both of them wanted the other person to eat. Many times, the food stayed untouched until morning because neither of them wanted to eat while the other stayed hungry. That was the kind of love they had. It wasn't a rich love. It wasn't a perfect love. It was a hungry love, but it was real. As the months passed, the pressure became worse. The landlord had started asking questions. Bills kept increasing. Food kept becoming more expensive, but their income refused to grow. Sometimes Etanalog would sit outside their small apartment after work, watching expensive cars drive past him. He wasn't jealous. He was simply wondering what it felt like to live without worrying about tomorrow. Huchena noticed the change in him. She noticed that he smiled less. He laughed less. He talked less. Sometimes she caught him staring into space for several minutes without saying a single word. He wasn't thinking about becoming rich. He was thinking about surviving another week. Then one afternoon, something happened that planted a dangerous idea inside Huchena's heart. While selling in the market, someone called her name. She turned around. At first, she didn't recognize the woman standing in front of her. Beautiful clothes, expensive jewelry, confidence. Then the woman smiled. Immediately, Huchena remembered. It was Difei, her childhood friend. The two women hugged each other with excitement. Years had passed since they had last seen each other. For the next few days, Difei visited her almost every afternoon. They laughed about old memories. They talked about school. They remembered the dreams they once had as little girls. For a few moments each day, Huchena forgot she was poor. But Difei noticed something. She noticed the tired eyes, the old clothes, the nearly empty basin, the forced smile. She knew her friend was suffering. One rainy afternoon, while both of them stood under a small shelter waiting for the rain to stop, Huchena finally gathered enough courage. She asked Difei for help. Not much, just enough to keep them alive. Difei became quiet, very quiet. She looked at her friend with eyes filled with pity. Then she slowly shook her head. She couldn't do it. Huchena didn't understand. Everything about Difei said she was wealthy. Her clothes, her phone, her jewelry, even the car that dropped her at the market. She clearly had money. So why couldn't she help? That question refused to leave Huchena's mind. A few days later, Difei finally told her why. She said the wealth she enjoyed today did not come from hard work. It came from somewhere else. Somewhere she wished she had never gone. There was a woman, a priestess, a woman people feared, a woman who could change lives for a price. The moment Huchena heard those words, something changed inside her. She wanted to reject the idea immediately. She wanted to tell herself she would never think about such a thing. But every time she returned home, she saw the empty pot. She saw Adamola's tired face. She saw the man she loved slowly losing hope. One evening, she watched him remove his worn-out slippers before entering the house. The sole had almost fallen off. He quietly stitched it together with a small piece of wire because buying another pair was impossible. He didn't complain. He simply smiled and said, "It will still last a little longer." That smile broke her heart. That night, Huchena couldn't sleep. She turned and looked at her husband. He was fast asleep after another long day of hard work. His hands were still rough. His face still carried signs of exhaustion. She reached out and gently held one of his hands. Then she whispered something only God heard. "I just want him to be happy." The next morning, without telling Adamola, Huchena went looking for Difei. Because for the first time in her life, she was ready to find out exactly what price the priestess was asking. The next morning, Huchena followed Difei. The journey was longer than she expected. They left the busy market behind. Then they left the noisy streets. Soon, there were no houses, no shops, no people, only a narrow path leading deeper into a quiet forest. The farther they walked, the quieter everything became. Even the birds seemed afraid to sing. For the first time since leaving home, Huchena wanted to turn back. She looked at Difei. "You never told me it was this far." Difei forced a smile. "I know." They kept walking. Finally, they reached a river. The water was strangely calm. Not a single ripple. Not a single sound. It looked less like a river and more like something waiting. Near the edge of the water sat an old woman. She wasn't doing anything. She was simply sitting there with her eyes closed. As soon as Huchena and Difei stopped walking, the old woman slowly opened her eyes. Then she looked directly at Huchena. "You came." Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Huchena looked around. Nobody had introduced her. Nobody had said her name. Yet somehow, the old woman had been expecting her. Fear slowly entered her heart. Before Huchena could speak, the old woman spoke again. "You love your husband?" It wasn't a question. It was a fact. Huchena slowly nodded. "You are tired of watching him suffer." Another nod. "You want him to become wealthy." This time, tears filled Huchena's eyes. "Yes." The old woman became silent. She stared at the river for several seconds before speaking again. "Every blessing has a price." Huchena's heartbeat became faster. "What price?" The old woman finally looked back at her. "A life." The words landed like a heavy stone. Huchena's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. "No, I can't." The old woman didn't argue. She simply looked back at the river. "The choice is yours." Nobody stopped Huchena as she turned around. She ran. She ran until she couldn't breathe anymore. When she finally reached home, Adamola was already outside repairing another tire. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands were covered in grease. The customer standing beside him complained about how long it was taking. Adamola simply apologized and continued working. He didn't complain. He didn't get angry. He just kept working. That night, Huchena couldn't stop thinking about what she had heard. A life. Was any amount of money worth that? She told herself the answer was no. She promised herself she would never return. But life has a way of testing promises. The days that followed were worse than anything they had experienced before. No customers, no sales, no food, no hope. One afternoon, Adamola returned home much earlier than usual. Not because he wanted to, because nobody had come. He quietly sat on the floor. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he looked at his wife and smiled. "We'll be fine." It was a beautiful lie. Huchena smiled back. But inside, something broke. That night, after Adamola had fallen asleep, she quietly cried. Not because she was angry, because she felt helpless. She loved this man with everything she had, and she could no longer watch him disappear one day at a time. The following morning, she returned to the river. This time, she didn't run. The old woman looked at her without surprise. I knew you would come back. Huchena's hands were shaking. If I accept, my husband will never suffer again. He will never know poverty again. That answer was enough. Slowly, very slowly, Huchena closed her eyes. I accept. For the first time, the old woman smiled. A smile that brought no comfort, only fear. That evening, Huchena returned home. She acted as if nothing had happened. She cooked the little food they still had. She laughed with Adamola. She even joked about old memories. Adamola noticed something. She looked happier than she had been in weeks. He smiled. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally getting better. After dinner, the two of them lay quietly on their small bed. The room was dark. Only the sound of insects could be heard outside. Huchena turned to face her husband. Adamola! He looked at her. If life ever becomes good, he smiled. It will. She smiled back. But if it does, promise me something. What is it? Take care of my parents. He laughed softly. Of course. And my younger brothers and sisters. Their family. No matter what happens, don't abandon them. Adamola looked at her with confusion. Why are you talking like this? I just want your promise. He gently held her hand. You have it. She smiled through her tears. Then she spoke again. And if you become rich one day, don't replace me. Adamola almost laughed. Replace you? She nodded. Promise me. He looked into her eyes. There was something different about them tonight. Something he couldn't explain. Finally, he smiled. I promise. Those two words were all Huchena needed. She rested her head on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke again. A few minutes later, Adamola was asleep. But Huchena wasn't. She watched him for what felt like hours. She traced the lines on his rough hands. The same hands that had worked every single day just to keep them alive. Then, very gently, she whispered, I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll forgive me. Outside, the night was unusually quiet. Morning came. The sunlight slowly entered the small room. Adamola stretched his body and smiled. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. He turned toward his wife. Huchena! No answer. He smiled again. You'll be late for the market. Still nothing. He gently touched her arm. Cold. His smile disappeared. He touched her again. Colder. His heartbeat suddenly became faster. Huchena! He shook her gently. Nothing. A little harder. Nothing. Fear rushed through his body. No. He sat up immediately. Huchena! He pulled her into his arms. Her body was completely still. Her eyes never opened. Her lips never moved. Please, please don't do this. His voice broke. He kept calling her name. Again, and again, and again. No answer. Neighbors rushed into the room after hearing his cries. Someone called for help. Someone ran for a doctor. Someone began praying. But deep inside, Adamola already knew. The woman who had stood beside him through every hungry night, the woman who had believed in him when nobody else did, was gone. He held her body tightly and cried until he could no longer breathe. His world had ended, or so he thought, because just a few hours later, while he was still sitting outside the house surrounded by neighbors, his phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, he answered. The voice on the other end said something that made the color disappear from his face. It was a call about an investment application he had submitted months ago and completely forgotten. Not only had it been approved, someone wanted to buy his idea for an amount of money Adamola couldn't even imagine. As the phone slowly slipped from his shaking hand, he remembered the promise Huchena made him give her. And for the first time, he realized that everything she said the night before sounded like she already knew she wouldn't be there to see it. Adamola buried his wife, but he never buried the questions. Every morning, he woke up hoping someone would finally explain what had happened to Huchena. The doctors couldn't. The neighbors couldn't. Even he couldn't. She had gone to bed healthy. She never woke up. That was all anybody knew. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Life slowly forced itself to move forward. Then the phone call changed everything. The investment proposal Adamola had submitted almost a year earlier had been accepted. At first, he thought it was a scam. How could a poor roadside tire repairer suddenly receive a call from a company willing to invest in his idea? He almost ended the call. But it was real. Very real. Meetings followed. Documents were signed. Lawyers became involved. People who would never have looked in Adamola's direction before were suddenly calling him sir. Within months, everything changed. The man who once worried about buying one loaf of bread now discussed business worth millions of dollars. His small idea became a successful company. Then another. Then another. He invested in transport, real estate, agriculture, technology. Every business somehow succeeded. Money flowed into his accounts faster than he could understand. The newspapers called him one of the fastest rising businessmen in the country. People admired him. People respected him. People envied him. But every night, he still slept alone. No amount of money could remove the empty space beside him. Sometimes he walked into their old bedroom and simply sat there. Not because he had to. Because he missed her. He still expected to hear her voice. He still expected to see her smile. Then he remembered. She was gone. One afternoon, Adamola remembered the promise he made on their last night together. Take care of my family. He immediately contacted Huchena's parents. He didn't go with security. He didn't go with expensive cars. He went as the same Adamola they once knew. He offered to pay every bill they had. He offered to buy them a better house. He offered to sponsor the education of Huchena's younger brothers and sisters. He wanted to fulfill every promise he had made. But before he could finish speaking, Huchena's father stood up. His face was filled with anger. So this is why our daughter died? Adamola froze. What? You used her? No. You sacrificed her. I didn't. The room became silent. Huchena's mother couldn't even look at him. Her younger sister began crying. Her brothers stared at him with hatred. You expect us to believe this happened by coincidence? You were poor. Our daughter died. And suddenly you became one of the richest men in the country. Adamola's heart broke. It wasn't like that. Then swear. He looked up. What? Swear before our deity that you know nothing about our daughter's death. The room became quiet. Adamola remained silent. Not because he was guilty, but because he did not believe in swearing before a deity. He knew he was innocent. He didn't feel the need to prove it that way. His silence became his biggest mistake. Huchena's father pointed toward the door. Leave! Adamola tried explaining. Nobody listened. He tried leaving money behind. They threw it back at him. He offered to buy them food. They rejected it. He begged. They refused. Before he finally walked away, Huchena's father spoke one last time. We would rather remain poor than eat blood money. Those words followed Adamola home. Mama Adamola watched her son change. He smiled less, even after becoming rich. Helen noticed it too. Her older brother had everything people dreamed of. Luxury cars, beautiful houses, private jets, companies, money. Yet he looked unhappier than he did when he repaired tires by the roadside. One evening, Mama Adamola sat beside him. My son. He looked at her. You've done everything you could. He remained quiet. You loved Huchena. I still do. I know. She gently held his hand. But life has refused to stop. Adamola stared into the distance. My own life stopped the day she died. Mama Adamola sighed. She knew arguing would change nothing. Almost 1 year passed. People expected Adamola to remarry. Business partners suggested it. Friends suggested it. Even relatives began talking. But every time he refused. Until one day, Helen decided she had heard enough. Without telling her brother, she arranged for him to meet one of her close friends. She believed they would get along. After weeks of convincing, Adamola finally agreed. Only because he wanted everyone to stop asking. The evening went surprisingly well. The woman was kind. She was intelligent. She laughed at his jokes. For the first time in almost a year, Adamola smiled naturally. As they walked outside after dinner, the woman gently held his hand. Adamola stopped walking. He looked down at their hands, then slowly pulled away. I'm sorry. She looked confused. I made a mistake. You don't have to feel guilty. I do. My wife is gone. He paused. But my heart is still married. Without waiting for another reply, he walked away. That night, sleep refused to come. Adamola sat alone in his bedroom. The lights were off. The room was silent. Then the temperature suddenly dropped. A cold wind moved through the room. The curtains began to move. Slowly, A familiar voice spoke behind him. So, you were finally ready to replace me. Every part of Etanalog's body froze. His breathing stopped. That voice. He knew that voice. Slowly, very slowly, he turned around. A woman was standing near the window. She wore the same clothes she had worn on the night before she died. Her face. It was Huchena. But something wasn't right. Her eyes looked different. Her smile wasn't the smile he remembered. It was colder, almost sarcastic. Etanalog stood up so quickly that the chair behind him fell. No. His voice trembled. No. Tears immediately filled his eyes. Huchena. She smiled. You still remember me. He rushed toward her, but the moment he reached out, his hands passed straight through her. He stepped back in shock. This isn't possible. She simply watched him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Etanalog broke. Why? His voice cracked. Why did you do it? She didn't answer. Why? I never asked you to do this. His tears wouldn't stop. We could have remained poor. We could have suffered together. We would have found another way. Your life was worth more than any amount of money. His voice echoed through the room. I never wanted this. For the first time, Huchena looked away, almost as if those words hurt, but only for a moment. Then her expression changed again. Cold. So, you've been enjoying the money. Etanalog stared at her. What? My parents. My brothers. My sisters. You left them to suffer. His eyes widened. No. I tried. You lied. I didn't. He told her everything. How he went to her family. How he begged them. How he offered them everything. How they accused him of killing her. How they rejected every gift. How they threw him out. As he spoke, his voice became weaker. I kept my promise as much as they allowed me. I couldn't force them. For a brief second, Huchena became quiet. Then she laughed. It wasn't the laugh he remembered. It sounded empty, almost painful. You always have an excuse. Etanalog couldn't believe what he was hearing. Excuse? I lost my life for you. I never asked you to. He shouted so loudly that the room shook with silence. I would rather have stayed poor with you than become the richest man in the world without you. Huchena stared at him. Her face showed no emotion. Then a strange smile slowly appeared. If that's true, let's see how much you really hate money. Etanalog felt his heartbeat become faster. She stopped only a few feet away. Her voice became almost a whisper. Tomorrow, $100 billion will appear in your dollar account. Etanalog frowned. What? You have 1 month to spend every single dollar. He laughed nervously. This isn't funny. Her smile disappeared. I'm not joking. The room suddenly became colder. If by the end of 1 month there is still any of the $100 billion left. She looked directly into his eyes. I'll kill you. The lights went out. The room became completely dark. When they came back on, Huchena was gone. Etanalog stood alone, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to decide whether he had just spoken to his dead wife or something that only looked like her. Etanalog didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He remained seated in the same chair until the first rays of sunlight entered his room. Everything that had happened felt impossible. His wife, the cold room, the warning. It couldn't be real. It had to be grief. It had to be his mind playing tricks on him. By morning, he had almost convinced himself it was only a nightmare. He walked into the bathroom, washed his face, and looked at himself in the mirror. You need to move on, he whispered. Then his phone vibrated. A bank alert. He barely looked at it. Another alert followed. Then another. His phone refused to stop vibrating. Annoyed, he picked it up. The moment he looked at the screen, his heart stopped. He checked the amount again. Then again. Then again. $100 billion. Credited. He immediately logged into his bank account. The money was there. Every single dollar. His hands began shaking. No. He refreshed the page. The money remained. He refreshed it again. Nothing changed. His breathing became heavier. The words from the previous night echoed inside his head. Tomorrow, $100 billion will appear in your dollar account. It wasn't a dream. She meant every word. For the first time since becoming rich, Etanalog didn't know what to do. He had made billions before, but this wasn't billions. This was an amount of money that didn't even make sense. How do you spend $100 billion in 1 month? He called financial advisors, investment experts, lawyers, business partners. Nobody understood why he suddenly wanted to spend money instead of making more. He didn't explain. He simply gave one instruction. I need to spend as much money as possible. At first, people thought he was joking. Then they realized he wasn't. Within days, the spending began. He bought companies, entire companies, not because he needed them, because they cost money. He bought hotels, airlines, shipping companies, factories, office buildings, oil investments, massive farms. He purchased thousands of acres of land across different states. He built schools, hospitals, libraries. He donated unbelievable amounts of money to charities. He cleared hospital bills for complete strangers. He paid school fees for children he had never met. He settled debts for entire communities. People began calling him the most generous billionaire in the country. But generosity wasn't the reason. He was trying to survive. Every evening he checked his account. Every evening his heart beat faster. Every evening the amount became smaller, but never small enough. Then the spending became even crazier. He bought paintings he didn't understand, ancient artifacts he never planned to display, luxury watches he never intended to wear, private islands, yachts, hundreds of luxury cars. Some people thought he had lost his mind. Others believed he was simply enjoying his wealth. Nobody knew the truth. Not even Mama Adamola. Not even Helen. One afternoon, he called both of them into the living room. 2 envelopes sat on the table. Mama Adamola smiled. What is this? Open them. They did. Both women froze. Inside each envelope was enough money to change several generations. Helen looked up in disbelief. Brother. He smiled. Spend it. Mama Adamola laughed. What? Spend every naira. Both women stared at him. I'm serious. Helen shook her head. Nobody spends this kind of money. You will. But why? Because there's more. Mama Adamola frowned. My son. Please. He interrupted gently. Don't save it. Don't invest it. Just enjoy yourselves. If you finish it, I'll give you more. Neither of them understood, but they accepted. Over the next few weeks, Mama Adamola traveled for the first time in her life. Helen bought everything she had only dreamed about as a child. They tried spending as much as they could, but compared to $100 billion, it was almost nothing. Days continued passing. The balance kept dropping. Slowly, painfully. Every morning Adamola woke up calculating. Every afternoon he searched for something else to buy. Every night he prayed. Sometimes Huchena appeared. She never stayed for long. She simply watched him, silent, standing in the corner of the room, watching. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she said nothing at all. Her presence alone was enough to make the room feel cold. One night she finally spoke. You've become very good at spending money. Adamola looked at her. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. You gave me none. She ignored him. Instead, she looked toward the window. I've been watching. I've watched every company, every donation, every building, every useless thing you've bought. Then she smiled. You're desperate. Adamola lowered his head. Yes, I don't want to die. She laughed quietly, a laugh that no longer sounded human. The final week arrived. The account was almost empty. Adamola hardly slept anymore. He checked the balance every few minutes. Every payment mattered. Every transfer mattered. Every second mattered. Then the final transaction went through. He stared at the screen. 0. Nothing remained. Not $1. Not 1 cent. For the first time in an entire month, Adamola smiled. He had done it. He survived. That night, Huchena appeared again. She slowly clapped her hands. Congratulations. Adamola let out a long breath. It's over. She tilted her head. Who told you that? His smile disappeared. You survived. She nodded slowly. You spent $100 billion in 1 month. Relief filled his face. Then she took one step closer. So, I've decided to make it more interesting. The next $100 billion will arrive tomorrow morning. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. What? This time, you'll have 1 week. His face went pale. No. You've already proven a month is too easy. She smiled. So let's see what you can do in 7 days. The next morning, his phone vibrated. One bank alert. Then another. Then another. He didn't even need to check. He already knew. Another $100 billion had arrived. And the countdown had begun. This time, there was no room to think. No room to plan. He moved faster than ever before. He bought entire multinational businesses, massive investment portfolios, energy projects, international real estate, cargo fleets, technology companies. He signed deals worth billions within minutes. His advisors could barely keep up. News channels couldn't understand what was happening. Some called him a financial genius. Others called him insane. Only Ademola knew the truth. He wasn't building an empire. He was running from death. 7 terrifying days later, the impossible happened again. The account was empty. He had survived. For the second time. That night, Uchenna appeared. She looked at him for a long time. Then she smiled. It was the widest smile he had ever seen on her face. And somehow it frightened him more than her anger. She slowly whispered, "Now let's make this impossible." Ademola felt every hair on his body stand. She looked directly into his eyes. The next $100 billion must be spent in one day. Silence filled the room. Then she smiled again. "If even 1 penny is left, I'll kill you." The next morning, Ademola didn't wait for the bank alert. He already knew it was coming. When his phone finally vibrated, he didn't even bother checking the amount. He simply closed his eyes. $100 billion. Again. But this time he only had 1 day. 24 hours. 1,440 minutes. That was all. He immediately began making calls. His lawyers. His accountants. His financial advisors. His business partners. Everybody received the same instruction. Buy everything. Nobody understood him anymore. They had stopped asking questions weeks ago. If Ademola wanted to buy something, they bought it. Within minutes, billions disappeared. Entire companies changed ownership. Massive properties were purchased. Investments worth billions were approved without hesitation. Money flew out of his account faster than ever before. For the first time, he believed he might actually survive. Then everything slowed down. There was still money left. Too much money. He bought more. The balance refused to reach zero. He donated more. Still money remained. He started buying things he didn't even need. Private jets, luxury ships, gold, diamonds, anything, everything. Hours passed. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time he looked at the account, there was still money. Less than before, but still enough to kill him. As the sun slowly disappeared, Ademola realized something. This wasn't a challenge. It was impossible. No matter how fast he spent, the time was moving faster. For the first time since all of this began, fear completely took over. He looked at the clock. Only a few hours remained. His breathing became heavier. His heart refused to slow down. He whispered to himself, "I'm going to die." That night, he sat alone inside his mansion. The lights were off. He didn't call anybody. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He simply waited. The account still had money. Not much compared to before, but enough. Enough to break the rule. Enough to end everything. The clock continued moving. Tick, tick, tick. Every second sounded louder than the last. Then the room became cold. Very cold. Ademola didn't need to turn around. He already knew. She was there. "You failed." Uchenna's voice echoed through the darkness. Ademola slowly lowered his head. "Yes, I warned you. I know." She walked closer. "I told you I would kill you. I know." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ademola looked at her. There was no anger in his face anymore. Only sadness. "I never wanted any of this." She remained silent. "I never asked you to die." Silence. "I never wanted your sacrifice." Silence. "I never wanted this money." His voice began breaking. "I wanted you." The room became quiet. "So if you're going to kill me..." He closed his eyes. "Then do it. I've been dead ever since you left." For the first time, Uchenna's expression changed. The anger disappeared. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "You really mean that?" Ademola nodded. "I would give back every company, every house, every dollar, everything. If it meant waking up beside you again." Tears slowly filled his eyes. "You were my home. You were my future. You were everything. And I lost you because you loved me too much. For the first time, Uchenna looked away. The cold smile disappeared. She remembered. She remembered the tiny apartment, the empty pot, the nights they lied to each other about eating. She remembered the promise. She remembered why she had gone to the river. Not because she wanted wealth, because she wanted the man she loved to stop suffering. Then she remembered something else. She had never asked him what happened after she died. She had only assumed. Slowly, she looked back at him. My family. Ademila swallowed. I tried. I know. I begged them. I know. They called me your killer. I know. His eyes widened. You know. She nodded slowly. I know now. There was pain in her voice. Real pain. Not anger. Not sarcasm. Just regret. I couldn't see the truth before. She looked down at her hands. I only saw my regret. I thought dying was a mistake. I thought. She stopped speaking. Then tears slowly rolled down her face. I blamed the wrong person. Ademila couldn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Both of them had already lost everything. After a long silence, Uchenna looked at the clock. Only a few seconds remained before midnight. She smiled, not the cold smile. The smile he remembered, the same gentle smile that made him fall in love with her. I'm sorry. Those were the last words she said. The clock struck midnight. Ademila screamed and everything went dark. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. His heart was racing. His whole body was covered in sweat. He looked around wildly. The small room, the cracked walls, the old bed, the empty pot. His breathing became heavier. No! He looked beside him. Uchenna, alive, fast asleep. He froze. Tears immediately filled his eyes. He touched her shoulder. Warm. He touched her face. Warm. She slowly opened her eyes. Ademila! He couldn't speak. He simply hugged her tightly. She looked confused. What happened? He kept crying. You are alive. She gently smiled. Of course I'm alive. Then she frowned. Wait. Her face suddenly changed. I need to go. She quickly got off the bed. After a while, Ademila's heart skipped. He remembered. The river. The priestess. Today. This was the day. Without another word, Ademila ran. Barefoot. He didn't care. He ran through the streets. People called after him. He didn't stop. He knew exactly where she was going. The river, and he tried his best to remember the dream and find his wife before it's too late. He kept running. His lungs burned. His legs hurt, but he didn't stop. Finally, he saw them. Uchenna and the old priestess. Just as Uchenna was about to step forward, Ademila grabbed her hand. She gasped. Ademila! He pulled her away from the river. No. She stared at him. What are you doing? He was breathing too hard to explain. You are not doing this. Doing what? I don't care how poor we become. I don't care if we never become rich. I don't care if we have to suffer for the rest of our lives. He held both of her hands tightly. I would rather be poor with you than rich without you. Uchenna's eyes filled with tears. She looked at him in complete confusion. How do you know? Ademila smiled through his tears. I just know. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Uchenna broke down crying. She threw her arms around him. He held her tightly. Neither of them looked back. They simply walked away together, hand in hand, leaving the river behind, leaving the temptation behind, leaving the future that should have happened behind. As they entered their small apartment, Ademila's phone rang. He stopped walking. Slowly, he looked at the screen. His face turned pale. It was the same company, the same investment application, the same phone call, the one that had made him rich in the dream. His phone continued ringing. Uchenna looked at him. Aren't you going to answer? Ademila stared at the screen. Then slowly, a smile appeared on his face. Maybe, just maybe, they never needed the sacrifice after all. He answered the call. Hello. Every story ends, but the conversation doesn't have to. Leave a comment below, like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.